The American Presidents, A Comprehensive Guide to the Men Who Led the Country, written by Harry Montgomery, narrated by Cedar Reyes. Chapter 1, The Founding Presidents. The founding presidents of the United States played a pivotal role in shaping the early direction of the nation. Their leadership laid the groundwork for the establishment of a new republic and the principles that would guide the country for generations. George Washington, the first president, set the tone for the presidency itself. His leadership during the Revolutionary War had earned him widespread admiration, and when the new government was formed, Washington was unanimously chosen as the first leader of the United States. His presidency established many of the precedents for the executive branch, including the creation of a cabinet, the two-term limit, and the peaceful transfer of power. Washington's leadership was tested with several challenges during his presidency, most notably the issue of neutrality in foreign affairs. As tensions rose between France and Great Britain, Washington carefully navigated the country through these conflicts, urging the nation to avoid entanglement in European wars. His farewell address warned against permanent foreign alliances and political factions, offering advice that would resonate throughout American history. Washington's decision to step down after 2 terms also set a significant precedent that would shape the expectations of future presidents. Following Washington's tenure, John Adams became the second president of the United States. A Federalist and a key figure in the early American Revolution, Adams had been a vocal advocate for independence and the formation of a strong central government. His presidency, however, was marked by political divisions and foreign policy struggles. The most notable event during his administration was the quasi-war with France, which resulted from tensions over the French Revolution and the actions of the French government against American shipping. The conflict, though never fully declared as a war, tested the young nation's ability to assert its interests on the global stage. Adams' presidency also witnessed the passage of the Alien and Sedition Acts, which were controversial laws aimed at curbing the influence of French immigrants and suppressing political dissent. These acts faced strong opposition, particularly from Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, who argued that they violated the constitutional rights of Americans. Despite these internal challenges, Adams managed to avoid full-scale war with France, securing a peace treaty that helped stabilize the country's foreign relations. Thomas Jefferson, the third president, was one of the most influential figures of his era. A leader of the Democratic-Republican Party, Jefferson championed states' rights and a limited federal government. His presidency saw the expansion of the United States through the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, which doubled the size of the nation and opened up vast new territories for settlement. Jefferson's vision of an agrarian republic, however, faced challenges as the country grew and developed economically. Jefferson's foreign policy also faced difficulties, particularly with Great Britain and France. The Embargo Act of 1807, which was meant to protect American interests by cutting off trade with both nations, ended up harming the American economy and was widely unpopular. Nevertheless, Jefferson's presidency is remembered for its commitment to Republican values, the preservation of the Union, and the successful expansion of American territory. The presidencies of Washington, Adams, and Jefferson were crucial in establishing the United States as a functioning republic. Their leadership not only shaped the direction of the nation, but also set enduring precedents for future presidents. Each faced unique challenges that tested the resilience of the new republic, but their actions ultimately helped ensure the survival and growth of the United States. George Washington and the birth of the nation. George Washington stands at the forefront of American history as a symbol of unity and strength. his leadership guiding the nation from the turmoil of revolution into the beginnings of an independent republic. Born into a world of colonial struggle, Washington emerged as a unifying figure during a time when the challenges faced by the fledgling nation were overwhelming. His determination and character were evident as he accepted the immense responsibility of leading a diverse and often divided group of individuals into a new era of self-governance. Throughout the Revolutionary War, Washington proved to be a man of both military strategy and personal integrity. He led colonial forces through harsh winters, difficult battles, and unexpected setbacks. Despite facing a well-trained and well-equipped British army, Washington maintained the resolve of his troops by instilling them with hope and the belief that their sacrifice would create a better future. His ability to balance military acumen with a genuine care for the lives of his soldiers contributed significantly to the ultimate success of the American Revolution. After the victory in battle, as the Revolution gave way to the task of building a stable nation, Washington's role expanded far beyond that of a military general. He became a central figure in the political transformation that would shape the United States. His participation in the Constitutional Convention reflected his deep understanding of both the necessity of a strong central government and the importance of preserving the rights and freedoms of the individual states. Washington's presence in these foundational moments provided the new government with legitimacy and stability. When he was later elected as the first president, his leadership took on an even greater symbolic significance. The creation of the presidency itself was still in its infancy and uncharted territory, but Washington handled the enormous responsibilities with grace and wisdom. He set many precedents that would define the future of American governance, including the practice of a peaceful transfer of power and the importance of neutrality in foreign affairs. Washington's decisions in office reflected his commitment to a government by the people, influencing the ideals upon which the nation was built. Washington's commitment to unity was perhaps his most enduring legacy. In a time when deep-seated divisions threatened to tear the young nation apart, he recognized that the country needed a central figure capable of binding its diverse elements together. His actions during his presidency, from the formation of the cabinet to his careful balancing of competing interests among states, contributed to a robust framework for the government. Even his decision to step down after 2 terms of office, refusing the temptation of power, underscored his dedication to the principles of democratic governance. Today, George Washington's contributions remain a cornerstone of American history. His leadership, courage, and vision during the birth of the nation continue to serve as an inspiration for generations. His legacy is a reminder that the creation of a stable, lasting government rests on the shoulders of those willing to put their country's future before their own ambitions, a testament to the enduring spirit of a nation born from struggle and guided by principles of freedom and unity. John Adams, The Federalist Vision. John Adams embodied the Federalist vision at a time when the American Republic was struggling to define its identity and navigate the turbulent waters of domestic and international politics. Adams was a dedicated advocate for a strong national government and believed that the survival of the new nation depended on robust institutions, clear principles, and a balance of power that would prevent any one faction from dominating. His ideas were fundamentally rooted in the belief that a well-organized government based on checks and balances was the cornerstone of maintaining liberty and order within the United States. Adams' tenure as the second president of the United States was marked by his persistent efforts to fortify the young nation. Determined to safeguard the Union, he worked to establish a stable and effective federal system. As a leading Federalist, Adams consistently argued for a centralized authority that could provide stability in times of political disarray. His conviction that the federal government must wield sufficient power to govern effectively was evident in his approach to both domestic policy and international relations. He believed that clear and decisive leadership was necessary to ensure the continuity of the Republic, especially in the wake of revolutionary change. Internationally, Adams faced significant challenges that tested the strength and resilience of the Federalist vision. The ongoing conflict in Europe, particularly the war between France and Great Britain, threatened to draw the United States into a costly entanglement. In response to these pressures, Adams sought to maintain a policy of neutrality, while also safeguarding American commerce and national interests. His handling of the quasi-war with France demonstrated his commitment to protecting the nation's sovereignty without resorting to full-scale military confrontation. This delicate balancing act was a testament to his strategic thinking and unwavering adherence to the principles of the Federalist doctrine. Domestically, Adams was driven by the belief that a strong central government was essential to ward off factionalism and protect against the encroachment of local interests over national goals. His support for policies aimed at strengthening federal authority, including the controversial Alien and Sedition Acts, underscored his determination to secure the stability of the government. Although these measures sparked considerable debate and controversy, they were rooted in his deep-seated conviction that extraordinary times demanded decisive action. Adams argued that the measures, while severe, were necessary to counteract internal threats and ensure the nation's continued growth. Despite the political storms that characterized his presidency, Adams remained steadfast in his commitment to the Federalist vision. He was unyielding in his pursuit of a coherent system of government that balanced the rights of individual states with the imperatives of a strong central authority. His legacy is a complex one, interwoven with fierce political debate and the difficult choices that accompanied the birth of a nation. Even as he encountered formidable opposition and the partisan divisions of his time, Adams' dedication to principles of order, accountability, and measured governance resonated deeply with his supporters. John Adams' vision of a government empowered by centralized authority, yet balanced by the need for accountability and respect for individual liberties, has left an indelible mark on American political thought. His presidency underscored the tension between security and freedom, a tension that continues to shape the United States today. Through his actions and writings, Adams provided a blueprint for the kind of careful, deliberate federalism that remains central to the American political tradition. Thomas Jefferson and the expansion of America. Thomas Jefferson stands as one of the most influential figures in American history, whose presidency transformed the nation through an enduring vision of expansion and democratic ideals. His approach to governing and his commitment to growth not only redefined the role of the federal government, but also reshaped the territorial boundaries of the United States. Jefferson's ideas were deeply rooted in the notion that a nation's strength could be measured by both its adherence to the principles of liberty and its potential for growth, offering an innovative blueprint for America's development. Jefferson's presidency is marked by his tireless efforts to extend American influence across the continent. His support for exploration and expansion found its most significant expression in the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, a transaction that doubled the country's size overnight. This monumental acquisition was not just a land deal, it was a bold step towards fulfilling the idea of an empire of liberty, where the benefits of freedom and democratic ideals could be spread from sea to shining sea. In embracing the purchase, Jefferson balanced idealism with pragmatic governance, despite concerns from some members of his administration over its constitutionality. The expansion of American territory under Jefferson also paved the way for future explorations. By commissioning expeditions such as the Lewis and Clark expedition, Jefferson aimed to scientifically and culturally map the vast regions of the newly acquired lands. This expedition played a crucial role in collecting valuable information about the geography, flora, fauna, and the indigenous populations encountered along the way. The findings not only enriched the nation's understanding of its own landscape, but also helped to solidify the United States' claim to the West, setting the stage for further territorial claims and expansions in the years to follow. Jefferson was equally committed to the vision of an agrarian society, which he believed was fundamental to maintaining a balanced and virtuous republic. He envisioned America as a land of independent yeoman farmers whose way of life was the backbone of the nation's democratic ideals. This vision influenced his policies on land distribution and westward expansion, as he encouraged settlement in the newly acquired territories. The ideal of a society based on the dignity of labor and individual enterprise was central to his overall philosophy, and it had a lasting impact on American culture and economic development. Despite facing significant challenges, including opposition over the implications of rapid expansion and the integration of diverse populations, Jefferson's efforts created a legacy that redefined the young nation. His initiatives not only increased the geographic scope of the United States, but also encouraged a spirit of exploration and innovation that would characterize American society for generations to come. His administration's willingness to embrace both risk and opportunity paved the way for a future where the blend of democratic principles and a frontier spirit would drive national progress. Through the Louisiana Purchase and subsequent explorations, Thomas Jefferson left an indelible mark on the course of American history. His leadership during a critical period of expansion underscored his belief in the potential of the United States to grow while remaining true to its foundational ideals. The expansion of America under Jefferson's guidance created the framework for a nation that would continue to evolve and expand, ultimately laying the groundwork for the modern United States. Chapter 2: The Early Republic and Its Challenges. The early republic was a period of intense transformation and experimentation as the newly independent nation sought to establish a stable government while wrestling with internal divisions and external threats. In the aftermath of revolution, the founding leaders gathered with the daunting task of crafting a system that could embody the aspirations of freedom and self-governance while managing the inevitable tensions arising from disparate regional interests and political ideologies. At its core, this period was characterized by a struggle to balance the powers of a central government with those of individual states, as new ideas about democracy and federalism clashed with long-standing traditions and emergent needs. In the years following the drafting of the Constitution, the fledgling government faced significant challenges in implementing policies that could promote national unity. The debates between Federalists, who advocated for a strong central authority, and Anti-Federalists, who feared the concentration of power, underscored the inherent difficulty of uniting a nation built on the legacy of colonial independence and a distrust of centralized control. These ideological conflicts were not merely abstract debates. They reverberated throughout the political landscape, influencing decisions that affected both domestic policy and international relations. Economic instability further complicated the efforts of the early republic. The scars left by the Revolutionary War manifested in a fragile economy that struggled to balance debt with limited resources. The government had to develop systems to regulate commerce, support fledgling industries, and manage the distribution of land in a country marked by rapid expansion and uneven development. The challenges of creating an economic infrastructure that could support the ideals of liberty and prosperity were immense, and every policy decision carried with it the weight of political contestation. Internationally, the new nation was caught in a web of global rivalries. The early republic had to navigate treacherous waters as European powers, particularly Britain and France, vied for influence and control. The pressure to maintain neutrality was compounded by the expectations of American merchants and citizens who were eager for their country to assert itself on the world stage. Diplomatic efforts during this period were fraught with the risk of being drawn into conflicts that could jeopardize the hard-won independence of the United States. Successes and failures in managing these international dynamics were deeply intertwined with the domestic struggles over the shape and power of the central government. Within this turbulent context, the leaders of the early republic had to contend with the practicalities of governance alongside the lofty rhetoric of revolutionary ideals. The creation of effective administrative structures, the establishment of judicial processes, and the formulation of a coherent foreign policy were all critical undertakings that demanded both vision and pragmatism. The difficulties encountered in reconciling regional diversity with a unified national identity laid the foundation for many of the challenges that would continue to confront the country in the decades to come. Ultimately, the early republic was a crucible in which the identity of the United States was forged. While the challenges of implementing a new system of government and fostering economic stability were profound, the experiences of this formative period underscored the resilience and determination of a nation built on the promise of liberty and self-determination. The legacy of these challenges continues to influence American political life, serving as a reminder of the enduring quest to perfect the Union. James Madison and the War of 1812. James Madison's presidency was dramatically defined by the outbreak of the War of 1812, a conflict that tested the young nation's resilience and ability to defend its sovereignty. His leadership during this turbulent period underscored his commitment to maintaining American independence amid international pressures, while also exposing the limitations and challenges inherent in governing a nation still in its early stages of development. Faced with ongoing maritime disputes and British interference in American trade, Madison ultimately found that military action was necessary to assert the country's rights and protect its interests. The roots of the conflict lay in long-standing tensions with Britain. American ships were being harassed, and impressment policies that forced seamen into service in the British Navy provoked fierce indignation among citizens and lawmakers alike. Madison, who had long championed the need for national sovereignty and self-respect, was pressured by these events to take decisive action, even though many in his administration were reluctant to declare war. The decision to confront Britain was not taken lightly, as Madison had to balance the views of his advisors, the opinions of a divided Congress, and the unpredictable nature of international relations. His determination to defend American honor ultimately led to a declaration of war in 1812, a move that would have long-lasting implications for the nation. During the war, Madison's leadership was marked by both significant challenges and unexpected successes. The military campaigns were a mixture of setbacks and hard-fought victories. Early in the conflict, American forces encountered difficulties due to a lack of preparation, inadequate resources, and a military structure that had not been fully developed. These early failures exposed deep flaws in the nation's infrastructure and raised serious questions about the effectiveness of government policies in preparing the country for war. However, as the conflict progressed, American resolve began to harden. The successes in key battles demonstrated that despite initial setbacks, the nation was capable of mounting a spirited defense against a formidable foe. Madison's role extended beyond merely overseeing military operations. He worked tirelessly to ensure that the nation's economy could sustain the prolonged demands of war. His administration was forced to navigate a delicate balance between funding military efforts and addressing domestic economic concerns. The strain of war placed considerable pressure on the country's finances, but it also provided an impetus for economic reforms that would later transform the American economy. As Madison grappled with these challenges, he also sought to uphold principles of democracy by fostering a spirit of national unity and patriotism that would rally the American people around a common cause. The War of 1812 proved to be a defining moment for Madison's presidency. It was a period when his resolve was tested by both international adversaries and internal weaknesses. Despite the harsh realities of war, Madison's steadfast commitment to defending American sovereignty helped forge a renewed sense of national identity. This conflict, often referred to as America's Second War of Independence, ultimately reinforced the country's determination to stand as an equal power among nations. In reflecting on this turbulent period, it becomes evident that James Madison's leadership during the War of 1812 was instrumental in shaping the future trajectory of the United States as it sought to navigate a rapidly changing world while holding fast to its foundational ideals. James Monroe and the Monroe Doctrine. James Monroe, the fifth President of the United States, directed the nation during an era of burgeoning national identity and transformation on both the domestic and international fronts. His presidency was marked by a profound commitment to the principles of sovereignty and self-determination, culminating in the establishment of the Monroe Doctrine, a defining statement of American foreign policy that signaled a new role for the United States in the Western Hemisphere. As European powers looked to reassert their influence in the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars, Monroe took a bold stance, declaring that further colonization or interference in the affairs of the Americas would be viewed as a hostile act against the fledgling nations of the region and against the United States itself. Monroe's vision was to promote a continent free from the grasp of Old World empires, one where newly independent nations could flourish without the threat of external domination. The Monroe Doctrine was not an aggressive expansionist policy, but rather a defensive measure designed to protect the sovereignty of states throughout the Americas. By articulating this doctrine, Monroe established a framework that would deter European powers from embarking on new colonizing ventures or from attempting to reestablish control over regions that had broken free from colonial rule. His policy underscored the importance of mutual respect between nations and asserted that the era of European colonialism in the Western Hemisphere was drawing to a close. On the domestic front, the Monroe Doctrine contributed to a sense of national unity and purpose, as it reinforced the idea that the United States had a special role to play as a guardian of freedom and independence for the newly established nations of Latin America. This concept resonated with an American public that was increasingly confident in the nation's growing political and military strength. The doctrine also served as a unifying principle that helped to bridge regional differences within the United States, as citizens rallied behind the idea of protecting their hemisphere from external threats. In this way, Monroe not only shaped foreign policy, but also fostered a stronger national identity at a time when the nation was still solidifying its place in the world. Internationally, the Monroe Doctrine represented a significant shift in global diplomacy. It sent a clear message to European nations that any attempt to recolonize or exert undue influence over the nations of the Americas would provoke a measured yet resolute response from the United States. Though the immediate impact was largely symbolic, the doctrine laid the groundwork for future American policies and has since been invoked in various forms as a cornerstone of United States foreign policy. By promoting a policy of non-interference and establishing a sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere, Monroe set a precedent that would shape the dynamics of international relations for generations. In establishing the Monroe Doctrine, James Monroe demonstrated strategic foresight and an acute awareness of both domestic sentiments and global power structures. His leadership during a period of significant change cemented the United States' role as a defender of emerging republics and a bulwark against the resurgence of European colonial ambitions. This doctrine remains a lasting testament to Monroe's vision of a free and autonomous Americas, underscoring his belief in the rights of nations to govern themselves and chart their own course in history. John Quincy Adams and the growing divisions. John Quincy Adams served during a period of rapidly shifting political and social landscapes, a time when the cracks in the national unity that had once seemed promising were beginning to widen into significant divisions. His presidency, though short and often overshadowed by the legacies of his predecessors, reflected the deep ideological and regional fissures that were emerging in American society. Adams, known for his intellect and diplomatic acumen, attempted to navigate these troubled waters with a firm belief in national progress through education, infrastructure, and balanced governance. Yet he found himself at odds with a political environment increasingly polarized by competing regional interests. In an era when the nation was dealing with the after effects of rapid expansion, economic instability, and emerging debates over states' rights versus federal power, Adams's approach to leadership was marked by his insistence on rational discourse and compromise. However, the evolving political climate was not always receptive to such a measured approach. The divisions that began to take shape during his time were rooted in stark contrasts between the agrarian interests of the South and the commercial and industrial aspirations developing in the North. These divisions were compounded by disagreements over the role of government in economic and infrastructural development, with Adams advocating for a more proactive federal involvement in modernizing the nation's infrastructure and supporting public education as a means to uplift society. Adams's diplomatic background and his previous experiences as a foreign minister served him well in articulating a vision of America that was rooted in Enlightenment principles and the belief that the nation could evolve into a more refined and civilized society. Yet, as he tried to steer the country toward a future defined by progress and rational policymaking, he faced robust opposition from those who viewed such changes with suspicion. Opponents argued that his policies threatened traditional values and the autonomy of states, thus further deepening the rifts that had long been simmering beneath the surface of American politics. The increasingly partisan nature of political debate meant that even well-intentioned proposals for reform were quickly dismissed if they did not align with the strict ideological lines that were forming. Domestically, the political debates of the time were characterized by bitter disputes over tariff laws, internal improvements, and the balance between federal oversight and local autonomy. Adams' vision of a united progressive nation was continually challenged by these contentious issues, and he often found himself isolated in an environment where consensus was becoming ever more difficult to achieve. The growing divisions were not merely abstract policy disagreements. They reflected a fundamental divergence in the outlook on America's future, where one faction saw the promise of industrial modernity and economic growth, while another clung to the traditions of agrarian self-sufficiency and state sovereignty. Ultimately, the presidency of John Quincy Adams became a microcosm of the broader national struggle to define American identity during a time of profound transition. His efforts to mediate between conflicting interests and to advance policies that would foster long-term national development were met with resistance from a political system that was increasingly driven by sectional loyalties. In facing these growing divisions, Adams's legacy is one of a leader caught in the crossfire of transformative change, whose forward-looking ideas were overshadowed by the realities of a fracturing republic. Chapter 3: The Age of Jackson. The Age of Jackson marked a dramatic transformation in American politics and society as the nation transitioned from an era defined by aristocratic elites to one in which the common citizen assumed an increasingly significant role. The presidency of Andrew Jackson was emblematic of this shift. His tenure introduced a new era of populism and political engagement that resonated with many ordinary Americans and challenged the long-standing power of established institutions. Jackson's leadership style was characterized by his deep skepticism of concentrated power, his willingness to confront entrenched interests, and his passionate commitment to what he considered to be the democratic will of the people. During this period, politics became more accessible and dynamic. Jackson's approach was both direct and forceful, and he sought to dismantle what he viewed as outdated aristocratic norms. His policy of expanded suffrage for white men and his support for the idea that every citizen should have a voice in the political process were significant departures from previous administrations. By championing the cause of the common man, Jackson mobilized a vast segment of the populace that had previously been disengaged from the political process. His methods, however, were not without controversy. Critics argued that his personal style and confrontational tactics undermined the stability of government, while his supporters heralded him as a transformative leader who broke down barriers between the government and the governed. Economically and socially, the era of Jackson was marked by rapid changes that both invigorated and challenged the American landscape. Jackson's administration was known for its vigorous opposition to monopolistic banks and concentrated financial power, symbolized by his famous battle against the Second Bank of the United States. He believed that the bank served the interests of a wealthy elite at the expense of the common citizen, and his efforts to curtail its power were both celebrated and reviled. This struggle over economic policy was part of a broader debate about the proper role of government in regulating commerce and ensuring economic fairness. The legacy of these debates would continue to shape American political discourse long after his presidency. Jackson's presidency also highlighted the tensions between expansionist ideals and the rights of indigenous peoples. As America pursued its destiny by expanding westward, Jackson's policies toward Native Americans came under severe criticism. His support for the removal of Native American tribes from ancestral lands led to policies that caused profound suffering and loss. While Jackson's actions in this regard were justified by him as necessary for the nation's progress, they cast a long shadow over his legacy and sparked debates about justice and the limits of popular will. The age of Jackson fundamentally reshaped American politics by introducing a more participatory system where leaders were expected to be in tune with the electorate. His tenure signaled a departure from the more reserved style of earlier presidents and set the stage for a political environment characterized by fierce partisan battles and dramatic shifts in public policy. The dynamic and often tumultuous political landscape of Jackson's era continues to be a subject of analysis, reflecting both the promise and the pitfalls of a democracy undergoing rapid change. In this period of transformation, Jackson's impact on the evolution of the American political system remains both indelible and deeply debated. Andrew Jackson and the Rise of the Common Man. Andrew Jackson emerged as a pivotal figure in American history by redefining the political landscape and giving voice to ordinary citizens who had previously been marginalized in government. His ascent to power signified a fundamental shift in the political process, one that embraced populism, and marked the beginning of a new era where the common man played an active role in shaping national policies. Jackson's presidency was driven by his belief that government should be a direct servant of its people, and his actions reflected an unwavering commitment to empowering individuals who had long felt sidelined by the elite institutions of the past. Jackson's rise was a testament to democratizing forces that were transforming the country. At a time when the political system had been dominated by wealthy aristocrats and long-established factions, Jackson offered an alternative vision. He championed the cause of the common citizen by advocating for expanded voting rights and by challenging the established political order. Jackson's belief was that every eligible American, regardless of wealth or social status, deserved a voice in the political process. This democratizing trend redefined American democracy, injecting it with a sense of accessibility and personal empowerment that had rarely been seen before. The policies Jackson pursued during his presidency were a direct reflection of his populist philosophy. One of his most notable actions was his battle against entrenched financial power, most famously embodied in his opposition to the Second Bank of the United States. Jackson contended that the bank represented an undue concentration of economic power that favored the wealthy few at the expense of the broader populace. His efforts to dismantle the bank were driven by the conviction that economic opportunities should be available to all and that government should serve as a safeguard against the monopolistic tendencies that could stifle the aspirations of ordinary citizens. This battle not only reshaped the nation's financial system, but also reinforced his image as a leader dedicated to ensuring that the benefits of prosperity were broadly shared. Beyond his economic policies, Jackson's leadership redefined political participation in the United States. His personal approach to governance was characterized by a direct and unfiltered style, which resonated with a large segment of the population. Jackson was seen as a man of the people, a rugged, determined leader willing to take on the powerful interests that had long been entrenched in Washington. His iconoclastic nature and willingness to challenge the status quo brought a new energy to American politics, creating a legacy of vigorous public engagement and laying the groundwork for modern party politics. However, the rise of the common man under Jackson was not without controversy. His legacy is also marked by policies that had adverse effects on certain segments of the population, notably Native American tribes, whose displacement became a dark chapter in the nation's pursuit of manifest destiny. Despite these contentious issues, Jackson's tenure remains emblematic of a transformative period when the democratic process was expanded and reimagined to include a broader range of voices. Andrew Jackson's presidency stands as a defining moment in American history, encapsulating a shift towards greater political inclusiveness and setting into motion trends that would permanently alter the nation's democratic framework. His legacy endures as a symbol of the complex interplay between populism, economic policy, and the evolving ideals of what it means to participate in a democratic society. Martin Van Buren and the Panic of 1837. Martin Van Buren assumed the presidency in a period of soaring national optimism, yet his tenure soon became overshadowed by one of the most severe financial crises in American history. As the architect of modern political organization and a skilled operator within the Democratic Party, Van Buren entered office with high expectations for continued growth and stability. However, the economic foundations that had underpinned the nation's expansion were proving increasingly vulnerable, and by 1837, a perfect storm of financial instability culminated in the crisis that would later bear the mark of his presidency. At the heart of the turmoil was the intricate web of speculative investments and lax banking practices that characterized the pre-crisis period. The speculative land boom, fueled in part by easy credit and the widespread use of state banks, had created a fragile economic bubble. When external pressures, including a contraction in credit due to previous policy decisions and international financial shifts, began to mount, confidence in the American economy eroded rapidly. Van Buren, inheriting an economy already showing signs of distress, found himself at the helm during a time when bank failures, declining crop prices, and a sharp decrease in consumer spending triggered a cascade of economic paralysis. Van Buren's response to the crisis was framed by his belief in the need for a balanced approach to government intervention and market forces. He was a staunch advocate of fiscal responsibility and the maintenance of a sound currency, principles that guided his policies even in the face of widespread panic. In response to the financial downturn, he pushed for the establishment of an independent treasury system designed to separate federal funds from the volatile banking sector. This proposal was aimed at restoring public trust in the government's ability to manage its finances and to serve as a stabilizing force amidst the chaos. However, critics argued that these measures did little to address the deeper structural problems that had led to the collapse, and Van Buren's policies were met with mixed reactions from both the public and political opponents. The Panic of 1837 not only exposed the vulnerabilities of the economic system, but also intensified political divisions. Van Buren's adherence to principles of limited government intervention, while theoretically sound, proved politically unpopular during a period when public sentiment called for more immediate relief and support. The suffering experienced by thousands of ordinary citizens, as businesses shuttered and unemployment soared, transformed the crisis into a defining moment for American politics. Many blamed the laissez-faire economic policies of the previous administrations, and Van Buren's measured approach became a lightning rod for criticism from emerging political adversaries. Despite the turmoil, the financial crisis of 1837 ultimately led to lasting reforms in the way the federal government managed its finances. The independent treasury system, although controversial at the time, laid the groundwork for more robust federal oversight in subsequent decades. Martin Van Buren's tenure, marked by the Panic of 1837, is therefore remembered as a period when the nation was forced to confront the realities of a rapidly evolving economy. His response to the crisis, characterized by cautious reform and steadfast commitment to his principles, reflects the challenges inherent in governing during one of the most turbulent economic periods in American history. William Henry Harrison and the Shortest Presidency. William Henry Harrison's brief time in the White House is etched in American history as a poignant reminder of the fragility of leadership and the unpredictable nature of political life. His presidency, which lasted just 31 days, remains the shortest ever recorded, yet it encapsulated themes of ambition, tragedy, and the evolving demands of executive responsibility in a growing nation. Harrison was a celebrated military figure and a symbol of American valor, having gained national recognition for his leadership during conflicts with Native American tribes and his role in expanding the United States. His military exploits had endeared him to many, and his popularity on the campaign trail promised a transformative presidency built on the legacy of his wartime accomplishments. Before taking office, Harrison's political career was characterized by a mixture of frontier heroism and the shifting allegiances of early American politics. His campaign appeal lay in his image as a man of the people, an embodiment of rugged individualism at a time when the nation was grappling with its identity after the Revolutionary War and during rapid territorial expansion. This persona resonated with many Americans who yearned for a leader that could connect with their experiences on the frontier and lead the nation into a new era of progress. Yet, the realities of political life, with its intricate demands and the immense pressures of high office, were soon to prove overwhelming in unexpected ways. Harrison's presidency began with great fanfare and significant public anticipation. His inauguration was marked by ceremonial pomp and symbolic displays of his military achievements, as the nation looked forward to a period of strong leadership. Unfortunately, the celebrations were short-lived. A month into his term, Harrison fell gravely ill, and debates over the exact cause of his decline have persisted among historians. At the time, it was widely speculated that the harsh weather at his lengthy inaugural address and the exhaustion from his extensive campaign activities had contributed to his condition. His illness rapidly worsened, and he passed away, leaving the nation stunned and unprepared for the sudden transition of power. The abrupt end of Harrison's presidency had significant implications for the future of the American executive office. His death underscored the critical need for clear protocols in the transfer of power and raised pressing questions about presidential succession that would eventually lead to more formalized procedures in subsequent administrations. Despite his fleeting time in office, Harrison's legacy endures as a reminder that the presidency is as vulnerable as it is revered. His campaign had set high expectations for a leader who could marry military prowess with visionary governance, yet the unexpected challenges of his short tenure precluded him from fully realizing this promise. In retrospect, the story of William Henry Harrison offers a window into a transformative period in American history, where leadership was as much about resilience in the face of adversity as it was about triumph on the battlefield. His extremely brief presidency serves not only as a historical curiosity, but also as a catalyst for critical reforms in constitutional practice. Through his untimely departure, the nation was forced to confront the harsh realities of political succession and the enduring question of how best to manage the highest office in times of crisis. Chapter 4: The Civil War Era. The Civil War era represents one of the most tumultuous and transformative periods in American history, a time when the nation was forcibly remade through conflict and ideological confrontation. The struggle between the North and the South, which pitted brother against brother, was rooted in profound disagreements over slavery, states' rights, and the meaning of liberty. This period not only redefined the political and social landscape of the United States, but also laid the foundation for the modern nation through the sacrifices of countless individuals who fought for their divergent visions of America. In the decades preceding the Civil War, mounting tensions between Northern industrial interests and Southern agrarian economies had steadily deepened. The abolitionist movement grew in strength, fueled by moral and religious arguments against the institution of slavery, while Southern states, reliant on slave labor for their economic survival, entrenched their stance on states' rights and regional autonomy. These irreconcilable differences eventually led to a breakdown in political discourse and increasing polarization. The failure of compromise efforts, such as those attempted in the Missouri Compromise and the Compromise of 1850, made conflict seem inevitable as the nation hurtled toward an explosive confrontation. When hostilities finally erupted in 1861, the Civil War quickly evolved into an all-encompassing struggle that reshaped every aspect of American life. The conflict saw unprecedented levels of mobilization and casualties as new technologies and total war strategies transformed military engagements. In the North, industrial might and a robust railway network enabled the rapid movement of troops and supplies, whereas in the South, the defense of a deeply rooted social order was fought with fervor and determination despite limited resources. Battles such as Gettysburg, Antietam, and Fort Sumter became symbols of both the brutality of war and the enduring resilience of a nation torn apart by internal strife. Political leadership during this period was equally significant, with figures like President Abraham Lincoln emerging as pillars of national resolve. Lincoln's commitment to preserving the Union and his moral stance against slavery, crystallized in actions like the Emancipation Proclamation, fundamentally altered the course of the war and the future of American society. His speeches and decisions not only rallied a divided nation, but also laid the groundwork for broader social reforms. On the battlefield, military leaders on both sides sought to demonstrate their prowess and secure the future of their respective causes. Yet the true victors would ultimately be determined by the will of the American people to rebuild and unify after decades of division. Civilian life during the Civil War era was marked by sacrifice and adaptation as communities coped with loss, disruption, and the harsh realities of wartime life. Women, in particular, stepped into public roles as nurses, caregivers, and activists, challenging traditional gender roles and laying early groundwork for future social progress. The war also precipitated dramatic shifts in cultural identity, forcing the nation to confront painful truths about freedom, equality, and the price of independence. The legacy of the Civil War era is one of both sorrow and renewal. While the conflict exacted an enormous toll in human lives and left scars that would take generations to heal, it also set America on a path towards a more inclusive and egalitarian society. The debates and sacrifices of these years continue to resonate, serving as a solemn reminder of the enduring challenges of defining and defending a united nation. Abraham Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation. Abraham Lincoln's legacy as one of America's most revered presidents is indelibly linked to his transformative decision to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. This historic executive order, issued during one of the nation's darkest periods, shifted the course of the Civil War and redefined the struggle for freedom in the United States. Lincoln recognized that the war was not only a contest to preserve the Union, but also an opportunity to confront the deeply entrenched institution of slavery that had long divided the country. His bold action to declare enslaved individuals in Confederate-held territories free was both a moral imperative and a strategic maneuver that would alter the dynamics of the conflict. In the early years of the Civil War, Lincoln's primary objective was to maintain the fragile unity of the nation, a pursuit that often meant making difficult decisions in the midst of political and military challenges. As the war progressed, however, it became increasingly clear that slavery was at the heart of the conflict. Lincoln's evolving views on slavery, coupled with mounting pressure from abolitionists and a shifting public opinion, pushed him toward a more decisive stance. The Emancipation Proclamation, announced on January 1, 1863, declared that all slaves in the rebellious states were to be set free, altering the fundamental purpose of the war and casting it as a fight for human liberation. The proclamation had far-reaching implications, both domestically and internationally. Domestically, it redefined the moral grounds upon which the Union was fighting. By framing the war as a crusade against slavery, Lincoln galvanized a growing anti-slavery sentiment among Northern populations and reoriented the nation's commitment to human rights. The document also served to discourage European powers, particularly Great Britain and France, from recognizing or supporting the Confederacy, as the moral high ground increasingly belonged to the side that now stood for freedom. While the proclamation did not free all enslaved individuals outright, it set in motion a process that would eventually lead to the abolition of slavery across the United States. The issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation was not without controversy. Critics argued that Lincoln had overstepped his constitutional authority, contending that the measure represented an exercise of executive power that should have been left to Congress. Nevertheless, the proclamation was a calculated risk, one that Lincoln believed was necessary to align the Union war effort with the evolving ideals of liberty and equality. His leadership during this period demonstrated a pragmatic willingness to adapt his policies to the realities of a nation at war, while never losing sight of the overarching vision of a more just and inclusive society. In the aftermath of the proclamation, the transformation of the war's purpose was palpable. Former slaves began to enlist in the Union Army, their participation adding both moral and military strength to the Northern cause. The Emancipation Proclamation not only symbolized hope for millions, but also paved the way for future legislative actions, such as the 13th Amendment, which ultimately abolished slavery. Abraham Lincoln's commitment to ending the barbarity of slavery through his decisive leadership remains a cornerstone of American history, a testament to the profound impact that visionary policy can have on the moral and social fabric of a nation. Andrew Johnson and Reconstruction. Andrew Johnson's presidency, emerging in the wake of the Civil War, was marked by turbulent struggles to reunite a nation fractured by conflict while navigating the complex challenges of Reconstruction. As Lincoln's successor, Johnson inherited the immense responsibility of restoring the Union and addressing the profound transformation required to reintegrate the Southern states. His approach to Reconstruction was controversial, characterized by a rapid reintegration strategy that clashed with the growing demands of a society eager to redefine the status quo, particularly in relation to civil rights and the social order in the South. Johnson, a Southern Democrat who remained loyal to the Union during the Civil War, sought to restore the Southern states as quickly as possible, adopting policies that emphasized leniency over retribution. His vision for Reconstruction was grounded in the belief that the Southern states could be reintegrated without fundamentally altering the existing social hierarchies. Johnson's policies granted generous amnesties to many former Confederates, allowing them to regain political power rapidly. This approach, however, proved problematic as it led to the rapid reemergence of pre-war power structures in the South that were resistant to changes in racial equality and civil rights. The leniency he exhibited created an environment in which old resentments and discriminatory practices could take root, undermining efforts to create a just and equitable post-war society. The president's insistence on swift reconciliation alienated many in Congress, particularly the radical Republicans, who sought to enforce a more stringent agenda for Reconstruction. These members of Congress argued that a tougher stance was necessary to protect the rights of freed slaves and to remodel Southern society in a way that would guarantee equality and justice. The struggle between Johnson and the radical Republicans was not merely one of political maneuvering. It was a battle of ideologies concerning the future of the nation. While Johnson favored restoring the Union with minimal intervention in state affairs, his adversaries believed that federal authority had a pivotal role in restructuring Southern society to secure the freedoms of the newly emancipated population. This clash escalated into a broader political confrontation that culminated in Johnson's impeachment trial. Although he narrowly avoided removal from office by a single vote in the Senate, the impeachment underscored the depth of the political rift. Johnson's resistance to congressional mandates on civil rights and his frequent use of veto power further eroded his influence, leaving him isolated as Reconstruction efforts moved increasingly in a direction he could neither control nor support. The ensuing period was marked by a power struggle that paralyzed effective governance and left lasting scars on national unity. In retrospect, Andrew Johnson's tenure during Reconstruction is seen as a critical juncture that shaped the course of American history. His approach, emphasizing rapid reconciliation without significant safeguards for freedmen, allowed many of the oppressive structures of the past to persist. The failure to create a robust framework for civil rights during his administration delayed the realization of true equality in the South for generations. Johnson's presidency serves as a reminder of the complex challenges of Reconstruction, a period when the nation sought to mend the wounds of civil war while grappling with the enduring issues of race, power, and justice in a deeply divided society. Ulysses S. Grant and the Challenges of Post-War America. Ulysses S. Grant emerged as a pivotal leader during one of the most complex periods in American history, navigating the turbulent aftermath of the Civil War and the arduous process of national reconstruction. His presidency was marked by sincere efforts to restore unity and rebuild a fractured nation, yet he faced formidable obstacles that tested his abilities both as a military hero and as a political leader. Grant assumed office with a reputation forged on the battlefields, which lent him both immediate credibility and a mandate to enact sweeping reforms. However, the transition from victorious general to effective president was fraught with challenges that extended from economic instability to political corruption and social strife. In the immediate post-war years, the task of reunifying the nation demanded decisive action on Reconstruction. Grant sought to reconcile a country deeply scarred by conflict by supporting policies designed to secure the rights of freed slaves while integrating the Southern states back into the Union. His administration worked to enforce the Reconstruction Acts, safeguard civil rights, and combat the resurgence of white supremacist groups intent on undermining the newfound freedoms of African Americans. Despite these noble intentions, the complexities of Southern resistance and entrenched local power structures made the process of transformation slow and contentious. Grant often found himself in a delicate balancing act, attempting to enforce federal authority in the South while managing the political fallout from Northern fatigue and Southern resentment. Economically, the post-war era was characterized by rapid industrial expansion, mixed with financial volatility. Grant's presidency encountered issues such as inflation, fluctuating markets, and a banking system still in its infancy. Efforts to stabilize the economy were hampered by the lingering disruptions of war and the challenges of transitioning from a wartime economy to peacetime commerce. Grant supported legislation aimed at reforming the banking sector and restoring confidence in the national currency, but his initiatives were frequently sidelined by the competing interests of powerful political and business factions. The pressures of economic recovery, compounded by the need for progressive reforms, meant that the country's broader financial health remained an area of concern throughout his tenure. Corruption emerged as another major challenge during Grant's presidency. Although Grant himself maintained personal integrity, his administration became notorious for the influence of corrupt elements and scandals involving government officials and business leaders. This environment of patronage and graft undermined public confidence in the federal government and distracted from the administration's reform agenda. Grant's determination to root out corruption, including his support for civil service reforms, was met with resistance from entrenched interests, and efforts to clean up government operations were often hampered by partisan infighting and bureaucratic inertia. Despite these challenges, Grant's presidency set important precedents that would shape the trajectory of American political life in the decades that followed. His steadfast support for civil rights initiatives, commitment to national unity, and attempts to navigate the uncharted waters of post-war Reconstruction demonstrated that even in times of great turmoil, leadership could chart a path toward progress. In retrospect, Grant's contributions to rebuilding the nation and laying the groundwork for future reforms underscore the complexities and contradictions of an era defined by both hope and hardship. His legacy remains a subject of ongoing reassessment, reflecting the enduring struggle to reconcile the promises of freedom with the realities of governing a nation in recovery. Chapter 5: The Gilded Age and Progressive Movements. The Gilded Age was a time of dazzling prosperity for some and deep inequality for many, a period when rapid industrialization and urbanization transformed the fabric of American society while laying the groundwork for later reform. During this era, the country experienced an explosion of wealth and technological innovation that spurred the growth of great corporations and led to the emergence of influential industrial leaders. At the same time, however, these rapid economic changes resulted in vast disparities in wealth and power. The lives of laborers, farmers, and the urban poor were often marked by harsh working conditions, political corruption, and economic instability. As the gap between the rich and the poor widened, social tensions increased, prompting a reaction that would eventually give rise to the progressive movements. In the bustling industrial cities that defined the Gilded Age, political machines and corrupt officials exercised control over municipal and state governments, often prioritizing private gain over public welfare. This nexus of business and politics facilitated an environment where monopolistic practices flourished, and the influence of powerful economic interests often overshadowed the needs of the ordinary citizen. Scandals and graft became common, eroding public trust and creating a sense of disillusionment with the established political order. In response to these developments, reformers began to organize, calling for changes that would promote transparency, accountability, and the protection of workers' rights. These reformers, many of whom were middle-class professionals and progressive intellectuals, started to mobilize public opinion by exposing the inequities and corrupt practices that had come to define the era. The progressive movement emerged as a multifaceted response to the challenges of the Gilded Age, advocating for sweeping economic, political, and social reforms. Progressives argued that unchecked industrial power and political corruption not only hindered democratic governance, but also contributed to widespread social suffering. They championed causes such as labor rights, women's suffrage, and public health initiatives, envisioning a society in which government played a constructive role in regulating business practices and ensuring that economic progress benefited all citizens. This period witnessed the rise of grassroots organizations, muckraking journalists, and reform-minded politicians who worked diligently to dismantle entrenched systems of privilege and create a fairer, more just society. The efforts of the progressive movement led to significant legislative and regulatory changes. Measures such as antitrust laws were enacted to break up monopolies and promote competition, while labor reforms improved working conditions and recognized the rights of workers to organize. In urban centers, reforms addressed issues of sanitation, housing, and public transportation, marking an era of increased civic engagement and governmental intervention in everyday life. Although not all reforms achieved their intended goals or were implemented uniformly across states, the progressive movement set in motion a series of changes that redefined the role of government and reshaped American society in fundamental ways. The legacy of the Gilded Age and the progressive movements is a testament to the enduring struggle to balance economic progress with social justice. The challenges and tensions of the period forced the nation to confront the realities of industrial capitalism and to chart a course toward a more equitable future, a process that continues to influence contemporary debates about government, economy, and democracy. Rutherford B. Hayes and the End of Reconstruction. Rutherford B. Hayes assumed the presidency at a time when the United States was still grappling with the legacy of the Civil War and the complex challenges of Reconstruction. His ascent to the nation's highest office marked the beginning of a new chapter in American history, one in which the federal government sought to draw a definitive line under a long and turbulent era of rebuilding the Union. Hayes became president amid fierce political battles, and his leadership was both a response to the deep-seated divisions that had characterized post-war politics and an effort to restore faith in a national government weary of conflict and corruption. The election of 1876, which resulted in Hayes's narrow victory, was itself a symbol of the intensely fractured political landscape. Contentious electoral disputes and allegations of voter suppression had marred the process, highlighting the lingering resentments between North and South. The controversial Compromise of 1877 ultimately paved the way for Hayes's presidency by calling for the withdrawal of federal troops from the South in return for support in resolving the disputed election. This decision marked a turning point in the federal government's involvement in Southern affairs, effectively signaling the end of Reconstruction and the beginning of an era that would leave many questions about the future of racial equality and civil rights unanswered. Once in office, Hayes attempted to heal a nation that had been deeply divided by decades of conflict and ideological strife. His policy of reconciliation was intended to bring about a restoration of local self-government in the South and a more conciliatory relationship between North and South. Hayes believed that a gradual withdrawal of federal oversight in the region would encourage Southern states to rebuild their institutions and create an environment of self-reliance. In practice, however, the end of Reconstruction left many freedmen vulnerable to the reimposition of discriminatory practices and the rise of white supremacist organizations. Without the protective presence of federal troops, Southern states increasingly enacted Jim Crow laws and other measures that undermined the civil rights gains achieved during the brief period of military oversight. In domestic policy, Hayes championed civil service reform and made efforts to curb the rampant corruption that had become synonymous with the era. He sought to modernize the federal government through the elimination of the spoils system and the implementation of merit-based appointments. While his reforms were met with varying degrees of resistance from entrenched political interests, they represented an early step toward a more professional and accountable public administration. Hayes's commitment to reform reflected the broader national mood, as Americans grew increasingly disillusioned with the systemic corruption that had marred Reconstruction governments in the South, as well as the patronage practices that plagued politics nationwide. Historians continue to assess Hayes's presidency as a critical transition point in American history. By ending Reconstruction, his administration set in motion a process that would redefine federal and state relations for decades to come, often at the expense of the rights of African Americans. Despite his genuine intentions to promote national reconciliation and institutional reform, Hayes's tenure is remembered as a complex legacy, one in which the promise of equality and justice for all was undermined by political compromises and the harsh realities of a divided society. His presidency encapsulates the bittersweet challenges of mending a nation while grappling with the enduring scars of a protracted civil conflict. Theodore Roosevelt and the Progressive Reforms. Theodore Roosevelt's presidency was a turning point in American governance, marking a period when vigorous leadership and a clear vision for a more equitable society reshaped the political landscape. His administration was defined by a commitment to progressive reforms that sought to curb the excesses of industrial capitalism and to protect the rights and well-being of ordinary citizens. Roosevelt's dynamic approach to executive power and his willingness to challenge entrenched interests set the stage for enduring changes in the role of the federal government. Roosevelt believed that government had a responsibility to act as a mediator between big business and the common people. His administration pursued policies designed to check the power of monopolistic corporations and to ensure fair competition in the marketplace. This drive resulted in the enforcement of antitrust laws and the vigorous regulation of business practices that had previously flourished with minimal interference. By taking decisive action against companies that stifled competition or exploited consumers and workers, Roosevelt not only demonstrated his determination to promote fairness, but also redefined the public's expectations of presidential leadership. In addition to addressing economic imbalances, Roosevelt was a fervent advocate for conservation and environmental stewardship. Recognizing the finite nature of the nation's natural resources, he pioneered efforts to establish a system of national parks and protected areas. His conservation policies were grounded in the belief that future generations were entitled to enjoy a pristine natural environment and that governmental oversight was necessary to prevent the exploitation of these resources for short-term gain. Roosevelt's initiatives in this area laid the groundwork for a lasting legacy of environmental protection and responsible resource management. Roosevelt's commitment to progressive reform extended to issues of public health, safety, and social welfare. His administration promoted regulatory measures to improve working conditions, secure food and drug quality, and protect consumers from unsafe practices. By championing these causes, Roosevelt not only addressed the immediate concerns of a rapidly industrializing society, but also set precedents that would serve as a model for subsequent reforms. His proactive use of executive authority to implement policies that address the common good helped to shift public opinion in favor of a more active federal government, one that was better equipped to respond to the challenges of a modern economy. Despite facing considerable opposition from established economic and political interests, Roosevelt's progressive reforms resonated with many Americans who felt marginalized by the rapid changes of the era. His direct and forceful rhetoric, combined with an energetic personal style, helped mobilize public support for measures that aimed to democratize economic opportunity and promote social justice. The impact of his presidency was felt far beyond his years in office, as the principles he advanced became integral components of American political ideology. In sum, Theodore Roosevelt's tenure as president was marked by transformative reforms that sought to harness the power of the federal government in the service of the public interest. His policies not only tempered the unbridled might of industrial monopolies and protected the nation's natural resources, but also laid a foundation for a more equitable society that continues to influence American political thought and policy today. Roosevelt's progressive legacy stands as a testament to the power of determined leadership in confronting the challenges of modern governance. William Howard Taft and the Republican split. William Howard Taft's presidency emerged at a critical juncture in the history of the Republican Party, when deep ideological fissures threatened to overwhelm the unified front that had long defined American conservatism. Taft, who served as the 27th President of the United States following Theodore Roosevelt, inherited a party that was increasingly divided by competing visions for the future. His tenure, marked by both administrative reforms and political strife, ultimately highlighted the challenges of leadership in a period when the forces of progressivism and conservatism were clashing in a public arena that demanded clear solutions to complex national issues. When Taft took office, many within the party still revered the progressive impulses advanced by Roosevelt. However, as Taft moved to implement his policy agenda, differences in approach became stark. Taft's style was more measured and cautious compared to the larger-than-life persona of his predecessor. While Theodore Roosevelt had built his reputation on bold, direct action, Taft favored a legalistic institutional approach to governance. His decisions regarding trust-busting and administrative organization, though significant in their own right, were seen by some progressives as too conservative or insufficiently dynamic. This divergence in strategy quickly became a focal point of internal party debates, as factions debated whether a modern, reform-oriented party could effectively address the nation's changing economic and social landscape. The internal strife within the Republican Party grew even more pronounced as Taft found himself increasingly isolated from the progressive wing that had once supported him. Prominent figures within the movement viewed his policies as a retreat from the ambitious reforms that had characterized the progressive era. They accused him of failing to push hard enough against the monopolistic practices and corporate abuses that had fueled public dissatisfaction. In contrast, more conservative elements within the party welcomed Taft's pragmatism, appreciating his adherence to legal processes and his less radical approach to restructuring government operations. This ideological divide was exacerbated by personal animosities and a growing sense of disillusionment among progressives who had expected a continuation of Roosevelt's vigorous reform agenda. The situation culminated in a dramatic split that not only splintered the Republican Party, but also altered the course of American politics. The rift between progressives and conservatives, which had been simmering beneath the surface, reached its peak when a faction led by Roosevelt broke away, setting the stage for a bitter and divisive campaign in subsequent elections. The split significantly weakened the party's national coherence, contributing to a period of political realignment in which voters were forced to reconsider long-held allegiances. The Republican split underscored the inherent difficulties of reconciling diverse ideological viewpoints within a single political entity, particularly when the stakes of economic reform and social change were so high. In retrospect, Taft's presidency and the ensuing split within the Republican Party offer a cautionary tale about the complexities of leadership during periods of rapid transformation. The challenges he faced in balancing reform with stability reflect the broader tensions that have repeatedly shaped American political life. Taft's legacy, though often overshadowed by the towering figure of Roosevelt, remains an important chapter in the story of a party struggling to define its identity in an era of profound political and economic change. Chapter 6: The Great Depression and World War II. The Great Depression and World War II stand as two of the most defining periods of the 20th century in American history, each profoundly reshaping society, politics, and the global order. The economic collapse that began with the stock market crash of 1929 plunged the nation into a nearly decade-long crisis that left millions unemployed and deeply shaken the faith of Americans in their financial institutions. The Depression not only exposed underlying vulnerabilities in the U.S. economy, but also forced a re-examination of the relationship between government and its citizens, setting the stage for substantial federal intervention and social reform. In response to unprecedented economic distress, President Franklin D. Roosevelt introduced the New Deal, a bold series of programs and reforms aimed at restoring public confidence, providing relief for the unemployed, and reviving economic growth. The New Deal was an ambitious attempt to reinvigorate a nation where banks had failed, industries had stalled, and the social safety net was nearly non-existent. Through initiatives that ranged from infrastructure projects to financial regulations and job creation programs, Roosevelt sought to stabilize the economy and mitigate the harshest effects of the Depression. Although these measures were met with a mix of support and criticism, the New Deal fundamentally transformed the role of the federal government, establishing precedents that would influence the country for generations to come. While the nation struggled to recover from its economic woes, a different challenge loomed on the international stage. The late 1930s saw the rise of totalitarian regimes in Europe and Asia, culminating in the outbreak of World War II. Initially, American sentiment favored isolationism, driven by the painful memories of the Great War and the hardships of the Depression. However, as Axis powers expanded their ambitions, the United States found its security and economic interests increasingly threatened. The gradual shift from isolationism to active involvement was marked by legislation such as the Lend-Lease Act, which enabled the U.S. to support allied nations without committing directly to combat operations. The attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 catalyzed the nation's entry into the war, uniting Americans under a common cause and mobilizing the country's vast industrial and human resources. The collective effort to wage war against fascism was transformative. Factories that once produced consumer goods were retooled to manufacture military equipment, and millions of citizens found themselves drafted into military service or engaged in the war effort on the home front. This mobilization not only contributed to the eventual victory of the Allies, but also catalyzed a shift in social and economic dynamics, paving the way for long-term prosperity in the post-war era. The experience of the Great Depression and the subsequent mobilization for World War II were deeply interlinked, each leaving an indelible impact on American society. The economic reforms of the New Deal laid the groundwork for a more interventionist government that could respond to crises, while the war effort demonstrated the nation's capacity for rapid collective action in the face of existential threats. These turbulent decades redefined national identity and set America on a path to becoming a global leader in the post-war order. The legacy of this period endures in the continued debates over the role of government in economic life and the responsibilities of a nation as both a domestic engine of opportunity and an international bulwark against tyranny. Franklin D. Roosevelt and the New Deal. Franklin D. Roosevelt's presidency marked a turning point in American history as he implemented the New Deal to confront the severe economic and social challenges presented by the Great Depression. Elected in 1932, during a time of unprecedented financial despair, Roosevelt understood that only bold, innovative action could restore confidence and set the country on a path to recovery. His New Deal was not a single program, but rather a series of sweeping measures aimed at reforming the economy, providing relief to millions of suffering citizens, and preventing future economic downturns. At its core, the New Deal was grounded in the idea that the federal government had a vital role to play in regulating the economy and protecting its people. The administration established numerous agencies and programs that sought to address the multifaceted crises of the day. Public works projects were launched on an unprecedented scale, resulting in the construction of roads, bridges, schools, and other critical infrastructure that not only created jobs, but also modernized the nation's physical landscape. Financial reforms were enacted to stabilize banking systems, restore public trust in financial institutions, and provide a framework for safer, more transparent economic practices. Agencies such as the Securities and Exchange Commission were established to regulate the stock market and prevent the kind of speculative practices that had contributed to the economic collapse. Simultaneously, the New Deal sought to provide direct relief to those most impacted by the Depression. Programs were designed to offer immediate assistance to the unemployed, the impoverished, and the disadvantaged. Initiatives such as the Federal Emergency Relief Administration and the Works Progress Administration mobilized a large workforce, providing jobs that enabled individuals to earn a living while contributing to the national recovery effort. This not only alleviated the immediate hardship of millions of Americans, but also fostered a renewed sense of hope and solidarity during a time of widespread despair. Roosevelt's approach was characterized by a willingness to experiment with new ideas and adapt policies as conditions changed. While critics argued that his expansive use of federal power set a dangerous precedent, supporters maintained that the New Deal was a necessary intervention in a system that had failed to protect ordinary citizens from economic ruin. By prioritizing both short-term relief and long-term reform, Roosevelt aimed to create a more resilient economic structure that could better withstand future shocks. The policies he championed not only helped revive the battered American economy, but also reshaped the relationship between the government and its citizens, establishing a legacy of intervention that would influence policy debates for decades to come. The New Deal era redefined the social contract by suggesting that prosperity and opportunity should be accessible to all, not merely concentrated among a wealthy few. Despite facing challenges and controversies, including resistance from conservative factions who believed his approach expanded governmental power excessively, Roosevelt's determination to transform American society left an enduring impact. His leadership during one of the darkest periods in American history demonstrated that government action could serve as a powerful catalyst for change, helping to rebuild confidence in both the market and the nation. Today, the New Deal remains a benchmark for government response in times of crisis, exemplifying how visionary policies can help a nation recover and evolve in the face of adversity. Harry S. Truman and the end of World War II. Harry S. Truman assumed the presidency at one of the most critical junctures in modern history, inheriting an administration in the midst of World War II and the urgent task of concluding a global conflict that had ravaged nations for years. With the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt in April 1945, Truman stepped into an office burdened by the immense responsibility of managing not only the strategic military operations, but also the political ramifications of ending a war whose stakes had never been higher. His leadership during the final months of the conflict would ultimately redefine international power structures and set the stage for the geopolitical dynamics of the post-war world. From the outset, Truman was confronted with the complex challenge of bringing the war to a swift conclusion. The European theater had largely been resolved with Germany's surrender, yet the fight in the Pacific remained fierce. Truman had to decide whether to continue costly conventional warfare against Japan or employ a more decisive, albeit unprecedented, tactic to hasten the end of the conflict. After weighing intense military deliberations and available intelligence, he made the fateful decision to authorize the use of atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This decision, controversial then and still debated today, resulted in a shockwave of devastation that catalyzed Japan's decision to surrender, thereby ending World War II and ushering in the atomic age. The impact of Truman's decision went well beyond military strategy. On one hand, the sudden and immense destructive power of the atomic bomb underscored a new era in warfare and international relations. Its use hastened the conclusion of the war, arguably saving countless lives that would have been lost in a protracted conflict or a land invasion of Japan. On the other hand, the bombings introduced deep moral and ethical dilemmas regarding the acceptable limits of military power. Truman's actions forced both the American public and the global community to grapple with the harsh realities of modern warfare and the long-term implications of nuclear technology. In parallel with these monumental military decisions, Truman faced the equally challenging task of transitioning the nation from a wartime footing to a period of peacetime recovery. The post-war era demanded rapid economic and social adjustments as the country shifted its focus from mobilization to rebuilding. Truman's administration laid the groundwork for long-term economic policies, spearheaded initiatives to address the needs of veterans returning home, and played an instrumental role in establishing international institutions such as the United Nations. These efforts were designed to create a stable framework that would foster global cooperation and prevent future conflicts, reflecting Truman's forward-looking vision for a world order based on collective security and shared prosperity. Moreover, Truman's decisions during this turbulent period exemplified the burdens of presidential power. The necessity of making choices with far-reaching implications weighed heavily on him, yet his resolve to act decisively was instrumental in steering the nation through one of its most challenging epochs. His leadership not only brought a close to the bloodiest conflict in human history, but also set forth a series of initiatives that would shape the global political landscape for decades to come. In sum, Harry S. Truman's tenure during the closing days of World War II remains a defining moment in American history. His willingness to embrace unprecedented measures in order to secure a swift end to the conflict, alongside his efforts to build a sustainable post-war order, left a legacy that continues to resonate in the realms of international policy and ethical debate. Dwight D. Eisenhower and the Cold War years. Dwight D. Eisenhower's presidency, spanning from 1953 to 1961, was defined by the complexities of the Cold War, a period of intense geopolitical rivalry that reshaped global alliances and redefined American security policies. As a celebrated World War II general, Eisenhower carried his experience from the battlefields into the White House, where he was tasked with maintaining stability in an era marked by nuclear threat and ideological confrontation between the capitalist West and the communist East. Eisenhower inherited a geopolitical landscape fraught with tension and uncertainty. Central to his strategy was the containment of Soviet influence around the world. His administration emphasized a balance between military preparedness and diplomatic engagement, reflecting a nuanced understanding that direct confrontation with the Soviet Union could lead to catastrophic consequences. To this end, Eisenhower bolstered the nation's defense through the expansion and modernization of the armed forces, while simultaneously supporting alliances such as NATO to serve as collective security guarantees. His approach underscored a belief in deterrence through strength, combined with measured, strategic diplomacy. Amid the international tensions of the Cold War, Eisenhower also focused on addressing domestic priorities. His presidency saw significant investments in infrastructure, exemplified by the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, which laid the foundation for a modern interstate highway system. This initiative not only enhanced national security by improving military mobility across the country, but also stimulated economic growth, reduced regional isolation, and transformed daily life for millions of Americans. By integrating infrastructure development into his broader national security strategy, Eisenhower demonstrated an understanding of how domestic well-being and international standing were interconnected. At the same time, Eisenhower's administration faced the daunting challenge of managing nuclear weapons and the associated arms race. The threat of mutually assured destruction permeated policy discussions and public consciousness. Recognizing the perils of unchecked nuclear proliferation, He invested in research and development programs that aimed at both strengthening the United States' deterrent capabilities and exploring avenues for controlled disarmament. Although Eisenhower was not able to bring about a decisive reduction in nuclear arsenals during his tenure, his policies helped lay the groundwork for future arms control agreements, signaling an early recognition of the potential hazards posed by nuclear weapons. Domestically, Eisenhower's leadership was characterized by a commitment to fiscal conservatism and moderate social policies. His administration worked to maintain budgetary discipline even while he pursued ambitious projects that would benefit the nation over the long term. His calm, measured demeanor and emphasis on consensus building helped to soften some of the more polarized aspects of Cold War politics. Eisenhower also relied on covert operations and intelligence networks, reflecting the secretive nature of Cold War maneuvering, where information was both a tool and a weapon in the contest for global influence. In summary, Dwight D. Eisenhower's time in office was marked by a delicate balancing act between military strength and diplomatic caution, domestic progress, and international vigilance. His policies during the Cold War years not only ensured that the United States maintained a position of credible power, but also contributed to shaping a global order that would eventually move towards dialogue and de-escalation. Eisenhower's legacy remains a testament to the challenges of governing in a world where the specter of nuclear conflict and the imperatives of national development coexist in a complex, ever-evolving landscape. Chapter 7: Modern Presidents and the Shifting Landscape. Modern presidencies have been characterized by an ever-changing political, social, and economic environment that has continually redefined the role and expectations of America's chief executive. The latter half of the 20th century and the early decades of the 21st century have witnessed a rapid transformation of both global challenges and domestic issues. In this era, presidents have had to navigate the complexities of globalization, technological revolution, and evolving public opinion, all while addressing shifting political alliances and deep-seated partisan divides. Modern presidents face the legacy of Cold War policies and the ramifications of post-industrial economic shifts. They have been tasked with responding to emerging security threats that extend beyond traditional military challenges, including cyber warfare, international terrorism, and climate change. These challenges require a new level of international cooperation and innovative diplomatic strategies that differ significantly from earlier eras when global order was defined by ideological confrontation. The modern president must therefore balance military might with a broader agenda that addresses economic instability, environmental concerns, and a more interconnected world that can rapidly transmit both ideas and crises. Domestically, the shifting landscape is reflected in the increasing diversity of the American populace and the rising expectations for government transparency and accountability. The communication revolution has played a major role in reshaping the political arena, as modern presidents now operate under constant media scrutiny, and political messaging is often driven by the instantaneous feedback of social media. This dynamic environment has forced presidents to become adept at navigating not only policy challenges, but also public relations battles. They need to engage with citizens directly, both to build support for their agendas and to manage the complex narratives that emerge from a fragmented media landscape. Economic policy in modern times has evolved to accommodate the realities of a globalized market. Modern presidents have been required to craft policies that encourage innovation, address income inequality, and deal with the rapid pace of technological change. Trade agreements, regulatory reforms, and fiscal policies are increasingly viewed through the lens of global competition and domestic economic opportunity. The modern president must act as both a steward of the nation's economic resources and a facilitator of change in a landscape where new industries emerge rapidly while older, established sectors face decline. Furthermore, modern presidents are constantly challenged by increasing political polarization and the rise of partisan media. Navigating a divided Congress and a skeptical electorate requires not only a deep understanding of policy, but also an ability to build broad coalitions and foster bipartisan dialogue. The modern presidential office is as much about managing political relationships as it is about implementing policy changes. And effective leadership requires a delicate balance between assertiveness and compromise. In sum, the shifting landscape of modern presidencies reflects an intricate interplay between global challenges, domestic pressures, and rapid technological and social change. Modern presidents must respond with a multifaceted approach that meets the needs of an increasingly diverse nation while addressing the demands of an unpredictable international environment. Their legacy is defined not only by the policies they implement, but also by how they adapt to and shape a world that is continually in flux. John F. Kennedy and the space race. John F. Kennedy's presidency was marked by a visionary challenge that sought to redefine American ambition and technological prowess through the space race. At the height of Cold War tensions, Kennedy publicly committed the nation to achieving a historic milestone, landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. This audacious goal, announced in 1961, symbolized more than just a race against the Soviet Union. It epitomized the nation's desire to extend its influence into new frontiers, harness cutting-edge technology, and inspire a sense of national unity and purpose. Kennedy's challenge was rooted in the fierce geopolitical rivalry of the time. The Soviet Union had already achieved significant successes in space exploration, including launching the first artificial satellite and putting the first man into orbit. These achievements not only bolstered the communist superpower's image of scientific and ideological superiority, but also instilled in the American public a determination to prove that the United States could surpass its adversary in the realm of space. Recognizing that the contest for technological supremacy was integral to national security and global prestige, Kennedy mobilized the nation's resources behind an ambitious program that promised to transform American society and economy. The space race under Kennedy's leadership catalyzed an era of rapid innovation and investment in science and technology. With the establishment of NASA as the central hub for the nation's space exploration efforts, funding and research shifted towards endeavors that harnessed advanced engineering, computer science, and aeronautics. The program inspired thousands of engineers, scientists, and technicians to pioneer breakthroughs that would later influence not only space travel, but also numerous aspects of everyday life, from telecommunications to computing. Kennedy's bold vision redefined the limits of American ingenuity, creating a ripple effect that encouraged continuous progress in technological research. Kennedy's initiative also played a pivotal role in invigorating the public imagination. His stirring speeches and charismatic leadership rallied a diverse nation around a common goal, infusing hope and pride in an era otherwise fraught with Cold War apprehensions. The prospect of venturing into space transcended political boundaries and spoke to a shared human desire to explore the unknown. It was a challenge that offered the promise of transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary, and it resonated deeply with a generation eager to leave its mark on history. At the heart of Kennedy's approach was the belief that exploration was fundamental to the advancement of society. He understood that by aiming for the moon, the United States would not only demonstrate its technological superiority, but also propel humanity toward a future of boundless possibility. Kennedy's vision fostered an environment where scientific research was given new priority, and the ensuing achievements provided a framework for international cooperation in space that continues to this day. His leadership during the space race remains a testament to the power of ambition, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of progress. In retrospect, Kennedy's commitment to the space race reshaped American national identity and demonstrated that with a united vision, seemingly insurmountable challenges could be overcome. His legacy in the realm of space exploration continues to inspire future generations to dream big, reach for the stars, and explore the vast frontiers that lie beyond our planet. You have been listening to The American Presidents, a comprehensive guide to the men who led the country, written by Harry Montgomery, narrated by Cedar Reyes.